Pilot delays takeoff to remove black woman her top Homeland Security role shocks everyone. What happens when you're unfairly judged simply because of how you look? Imagine stepping onto a flight, prepared for a routine journey, only to be singled out and labeled a threat not because of your actions, but because of someone else's assumptions. This is the story of Maya Carter, a senior leader in Homeland Security who faced a moment of glaring prejudice at 35000. Maya, a distinguished professional with a career dedicated to ensuring national safety, found herself confronting not just bias, but the very stereotypes she worked tirelessly to dismantle. What began as an ordinary trip to Washington, D.C. for a leadership conference quickly escalated into an unforgettable ordeal. This isn't just about a flight delay. It's a powerful account of systemic prejudice, resilience in the face of injustice, and the courage it takes to stand firm against bias. Maya's composed yet unyielding response not only left the passengers in awe, but also set a precedent for how such moments of discrimination can be addressed. What unfolded on that flight sparked a ripple effect, forcing an entire airline to reevaluate its policies and biases. Maya's story is a reminder of the strength it takes to uphold dignity and accountability, even in the most challenging circumstances. As you watch, we invite you to reflect. Have you ever experienced or witnessed prejudice in unexpected places? Let us know in the comments below. And if you believe stories like Maya's deserve to be shared, don't forget to like this video, share it with someone who might find it inspiring, and subscribe to our channel for more stories of resilience and justice. The bustling chaos of Horizon International Airport filled the air with a steady hum of voices, rolling luggage, and intermittent announcements echoing over the speakers. Among the sea of travelers, business professionals with sleek laptops, families managing restless toddlers, and tourists with oversized souvenirs, stood Maya Carter. Maya, a striking black woman in her early 40s, exuded a dignified, commanding presence. Dressed in a tailored navy blazer and a crisp white blouse, she carried herself with a calm confidence that drew attention without demanding it. Her neatly styled shoulder-length bob framed her face elegantly, and her sharp almond-shaped eyes suggested she missed nothing. Around her neck hung a delicate silver chain, a subtle yet sophisticated touch to her professional attire. Clutching a well-worn leather briefcase, a testament to years of travel and service, Maya walked with purpose. Her heels clicked softly against the polished floors, each step deliberate, projecting a sense of poise and discipline cultivated over years in public service. Today, she was en route to Washington, D.C. for a pivotal conference titled Strengthening Homeland Security Through Diversity and Leadership. This conference was not just another item on her itinerary, it was deeply personal. Maya had dedicated her career to breaking barriers and proving that diversity was not merely an ideal, but a necessity in fields where snap judgments could have dire consequences. Even in the crowded terminal, Maya felt the weight of subtle glances trailing her. She had grown accustomed to these moments, expressions of curiosity or silent judgment that followed her, a woman of color in a position of power. Some looks were innocuous, but others carried the unmistakable undercurrent of skepticism. Taking a seat near her gate, Maya allowed herself a brief glance out the window, watching planes taxi under the golden morning light. She mentally reviewed her notes for the day ahead, her sharp mind already anticipating the discussions to come. Yet, beneath her calm exterior, Maya knew that every space she entered came with an unspoken challenge to prove, yet again, that she belonged. As Maya Carter approached the boarding line for her flight to Washington, D.C., her steps were purposeful, her demeanor calm yet commanding. She handed her boarding pass to the gate agent, her smile polite but reserved. As she stepped into the first-class cabin, she noticed the subtle glances, some curious, others more pointed, particularly from a man seated across the aisle. Dressed in a neatly pressed suit with a Bluetooth headset resting casually on his ear, he studied her with an intensity that was hard to ignore. Maya was no stranger to such looks. Over the years, she had encountered many variations of this silent scrutiny, moments when people seemed to question her presence in spaces they subconsciously deemed unsuitable for someone like her. With a practiced ease, she ignored the man's gaze and focused on finding her seat near the window. Sliding her worn leather briefcase into the overhead compartment, Maya settled into her seat. The cool blast of air conditioning and the faint scent of leather offered a fleeting comfort as she prepared for the journey ahead. She opened her briefcase and pulled out a folder containing notes for her upcoming presentation, her sharp eyes scanning the neatly organized pages. However, the quiet hum of the cabin was soon interrupted by hushed whispers. From the corner of her eye, Maya noticed a flight attendant at the front of the cabin, speaking softly with the pilot. Their eyes darted toward her briefly before quickly looking away. Maya's expression remained neutral, but her instincts, honed by years in Homeland Security, alerted her to the growing tension. Moments later, the flight attendant approached her row, her smile polite but strained. "Excuse me, ma'am," she said, leaning in slightly. "Could I see your boarding pass again? Just a routine check." Maya raised an eyebrow, her calm eyes meeting the attendant's. "Is there a problem?" she asked, her tone steady and professional. "No, not at all," the attendant replied quickly, though her smile faltered. "Just a standard procedure." Maya reached into her blazer pocket, retrieved her boarding pass, and handed it over without a word. She watched as the attendant studied it with unnecessary care before handing it back. "Thank you," the attendant said, her voice soft as she retreated. The man in the suit across the aisle shifted uncomfortably in his seat, pretending to focus on his phone, but Maya felt his gaze flicker toward her more than once. She returned to her notes, her expression unreadable, but the tension in the cabin was palpable. Maya knew these moments well, spaces where she had to navigate not just her work, but also the unspoken biases of those around her. She had faced them before, and she would face them again, but she silently resolved that today would not be a day where she allowed prejudice to dictate her path. Maya Carter was reviewing her notes when she noticed movement at the front of the cabin. The flight attendant had returned, this time accompanied by the pilot. His crisp uniform and broad-shouldered stance carried an air of authority, but his expression was guarded, almost hesitant. As they approached her seat, the atmosphere in the cabin shifted, whispers spread among the passengers, and all eyes seemed to turn toward Maya. "Ma'am," the pilot began, his tone firm but lacking conviction, "we've received a security concern, and I'm going to have to ask you to step off the plane." Maya blinked, her calm gaze locking onto his. "A security concern?" she repeated evenly. "What exactly does that mean?" "It's standard procedure," the flight attendant interjected, her voice faltering slightly. "We just need to verify a few things before we can proceed." Maya straightened in her seat, her professional poise unshaken. "I passed through TSA screening, presented my boarding pass, and complied with all requirements. If there's a specific concern, I'd like to know what it is." The pilot shifted uncomfortably but held his ground. "Ma'am, we're not at liberty to discuss details, but I must insist that you disembark. If you refuse, we'll have no choice but to involve airport security." Maya's jaw tightened slightly, but her expression remained calm. "Then I suggest you do so," she said, her voice measured, "because I'm not leaving this plane without a valid explanation." The tension in the cabin grew heavier as the murmurs intensified. Across the aisle, the suited man who had been watching her earlier cleared his throat awkwardly. "It's just," he began, his voice breaking the silence. "You don't see people like you in first class often." The words hung in the air, cutting through the facade of vague professionalism. Maya turned her sharp gaze toward him, her eyebrow arching slightly. "People like me?" she repeated, her tone calm but pointed. The man flushed, fumbling for words. "I just meant, you're obviously accomplished. It's, unexpected, that's all." Maya's silence was deafening, her expression a masterful blend of incredulity and quiet strength. The man squirmed under her gaze, finally looking away, his discomfort palpable. The pilot, perhaps emboldened by the man's statement, spoke again. "Ma'am, this isn't personal. We're simply trying to ensure everyone's safety." "Safety," Maya said, her voice steady but with a hint of steel. "Are you suggesting that I pose a threat despite having done nothing to warrant this claim? Or is this decision based solely on someone else's baseless assumptions?" Her quiet authority left no room for rebuttal. The murmurs among the passengers grew louder, some nodding in agreement, while others remained silent. The pilot's confidence wavered, and the flight attendant looked increasingly uncomfortable. Maya's resolve was unshakable. She had faced countless moments like this in her career, and she knew one thing for certain: she wouldn't let prejudice dictate her place. Not today, and not ever. Maya Carter remained seated, her calm demeanor unshaken as the tension in the cabin thickened. Moments later, 2 airport security officers boarded the plane, their uniforms adding an air of authority to an already charged situation. The lead officer, a tall man with a clipped haircut and neutral expression, approached Maya's row. "Ma'am," he began, his tone measured but firm, "we've been informed of a security concern involving you. We'll need you to step off the plane for further questioning." Maya tilted her head slightly, her sharp eyes assessing the officer. "And what is the nature of this security concern?" she asked, her voice calm but insistent. The officer glanced briefly at the pilot, who stood stiffly nearby. "We've been told there were concerns raised by the flight crew," he said, avoiding specifics. "Concerns raised about what?" Maya pressed, her tone unwavering. "I've complied with all standard procedures, TSA screening, presenting my boarding pass and taking my assigned seat. What behavior of mine justifies this request?" The officer hesitated, exchanging an uneasy look with his partner. Before he could respond, a voice cut through the tension. "If I may," a woman said, standing from her seat a few rows behind Maya. Dressed in a professional suit, her badge was clipped to her lapel, identifying her as a senior Homeland Security officer. "I'm Rivera," she said, stepping forward. "Homeland Security. I'd like to hear the justification for this action as well." The murmurs among the passengers grew louder, a mix of curiosity and subtle support for Maya. The suited man across the aisle shifted uncomfortably in his seat, avoiding eye contact as Rivera turned her sharp gaze toward the pilot. "Is that illegal?" Rivera asked. "Captain," Rivera said, her tone carrying a quiet authority, "you're suggesting that a passenger who has passed all security screenings and presented no visible threat should be removed based on an ambiguous concern. Can you clarify the basis for this decision?" The pilot's posture stiffened. "We received a report from a passenger who felt uncomfortable," he said defensively. Rivera raised an eyebrow. "Uncomfortable? Since when does discomfort qualify as a security threat? And what specific behavior prompted this discomfort?" The pilot faltered, his gaze shifting to the flight attendant, who appeared increasingly uneasy. "It's standard procedure," he muttered, though the conviction in his voice had noticeably weakened. "Standard procedure?" Maya interjected, her voice cutting through the growing whispers. "As someone who has spent years ensuring the integrity of security protocols, I can confidently say that discomfort is not a valid criterion for enforcement. If there's a protocol I've violated, I'd like to know what it is." Passengers began nodding, and a few voiced their agreement softly. The atmosphere in the cabin had shifted. Maya's composure and Rivera's presence had turned the spotlight onto the crew's actions. The lead security officer cleared his throat, stepping forward again. "Ma'am," he addressed Maya, "we're trying to resolve this quickly. If you step off the plane, we can address these concerns without further delay." Maya's gaze was steady. "And what happens when I step off? Will I be allowed back on, or will this escalate into a baseless denial of service? I need assurances, not vague promises." The officer hesitated, clearly caught between protocol and the growing scrutiny of the situation. Rivera stepped closer, her voice calm but firm. "I suggest we all take a moment to reconsider the implications of what's happening here. Removing a passenger without valid cause, especially a senior Homeland Security official, would raise significant legal and ethical questions." The pilot's confidence seemed to crumble further under Rivera's steady gaze. The murmurs among passengers grew louder, some now openly questioning the crew's motives. "Why is she being targeted?" one passenger asked. "She hasn't done anything." The flight attendant, visibly flustered, whispered something to the pilot. He nodded curtly, but before he could respond, Rivera addressed the officers. "Gentlemen, you are here to enforce protocol, not biases. If this passenger has violated no rules, I suggest you reconsider your actions before proceeding." The officers exchanged uncertain looks. the weight of public scrutiny bearing down on them. The lead officer turned to the pilot. "Captain, do you have any specific evidence to support this removal request?" The pilot opened his mouth, but no words came. Rivera stepped closer to him. "Captain, let me remind you, vague discomfort is not a security threat, and removing a passenger without cause could have serious consequences for you and your airline." Faced with Rivera's authority, Maya's composure, and the growing unrest among passengers, the pilot finally relented. "Fine," he said, his voice tight. "She can stay." Maya's expression didn't waver, but her quiet strength filled the cabin. Ribeiro nodded in approval, returning to her seat, while the officers stepped back, their presence now diminished. The murmurs among passengers subsided, replaced with an air of quiet solidarity. Maya glanced out the window, her calm demeanor intact, though she knew this was just one battle in a much larger fight against prejudice. As the tension in the cabin reached its peak, a new presence stepped aboard the plane. Two senior airline officials, alerted by the growing situation, approached Maya Carter's row. The murmurs among passengers quieted as their crisp uniforms and authoritative demeanor commanded attention. One of the officials, a middle-aged woman with a calm yet firm tone, addressed the pilot. "Captain Andrews," she began, her voice clear and steady. "We've reviewed the situation and spoken with airport security. It seems there's been a misunderstanding." She turned to Maya, her expression softening. "Mr. Carter, we apologize for the inconvenience and any distress this has caused. Your identity and role have been verified, and there is no reason for you to leave this flight." The pilot, Captain Andrews, visibly flustered, attempted to respond. "I was acting in the best interests of safety." The official cut him off. "Captain, you acted on vague discomfort, not evidence or protocol. Your actions reflect poorly on this airline and on your judgment. We will discuss this further after the flight." Passengers began whispering again, some nodding in agreement, others murmuring in disbelief. Across the aisle, the suited man who had earlier made a tactless comment now shrank into his seat, avoiding Maya's gaze entirely. Maya remained composed, her calm demeanor unchanged. "Thank you for addressing the matter," she said evenly, though her tone carried an unspoken message. The damage had already been done. Captain Andrews, now visibly embarrassed, retreated to the cockpit. The flight attendant, who had initiated the routine checks, avoided eye contact with everyone, her earlier confidence replaced with evident discomfort. The senior official turned to Maya again. "This airline takes such incidents seriously. An internal investigation will be conducted, and appropriate action will be taken." By now, the cabin was filled with an air of quiet solidarity. Several passengers leaned toward Maya, whispering words of support. A young woman, seated nearby, clutching a legal textbook, spoke softly. "I just wanted to say thank you. Watching you stand your ground was inspiring." Maya smiled faintly, nodding. "Thank you," she said simply, her voice warm but reserved. As the plane prepared for takeoff, passengers exchanged glances, some offering quiet apologies for their earlier silence. Maya acknowledged their gestures with a polite nod, though she remained focused on the folder in her lap. While the hum of the engines signaled the start of the journey, Maya's mind lingered on the broader implications of the incident. This was not the first time she had faced such biases, and she knew it wouldn't be the last. Her role in Homeland Security was built on breaking down barriers, but moments like these served as stark reminders of how much work remained. After landing, Maya received word that Captain Andrews had been suspended pending a formal investigation. The airline's leadership released a statement acknowledging the incident and outlining steps to prevent similar occurrences, including mandatory bias training for all staff and a review of internal protocols. Despite these measures, Maya reflected on the deeper issue. Change was slow and often exhausting, requiring persistence and resilience. Yet for every instance of bias, there was an opportunity to challenge it, to demand better, and to pave the way for others who might face the same struggles. As Maya gathered her belongings and exited the plane, several passengers stopped to thank her for her courage. A few even expressed their own frustrations with prejudice and discrimination, inspired by her ability to remain composed under pressure. Stepping onto the tarmac, Maya felt the weight of the morning's events, but she also felt a quiet resolve. Her journey was far from over, but today, she had taken another step in ensuring that such incidents would not go unnoticed. The airline's investigation ultimately led to Captain Andrews' removal from his position. For Maya, it was not about personal vindication, but about accountability and the broader message it sent. Prejudice, no matter how subtle, has no place in professional or public spaces. Later that evening, as she sat in her hotel room reviewing her presentation for the conference, Maya allowed herself a moment of reflection. The title of her talk, Strengthening Homeland Security Through Diversity and Leadership, felt more relevant than ever. With a faint smile, she sipped her tea, knowing that every battle, no matter how small, was a step toward lasting change. Maya's story would ripple beyond the confines of that flight, inspiring others to stand against prejudice and fight for accountability, one courageous act at a time. In the days following the incident, the airline took swift action to address the fallout. A formal investigation revealed significant lapses in judgment and adherence to protocol, prompting leadership to implement new measures. Mandatory bias training for all employees was announced, alongside a comprehensive review of security and decision-making procedures to ensure fairness and accountability in future interactions. Captain Andrews, at the center of the controversy, faced serious consequences. Stripped of his role, he was forced to confront the biases that had guided his actions. For a man who had spent decades in the cockpit, the loss of his position was a stark reminder of how unchecked prejudice could unravel a career. While his departure was necessary, it also served as a moment of reflection for the industry at large, highlighting the need for systemic change. Maya Carter's experience quickly became a symbol of resilience and the importance of standing firm against injustice. Her composed defiance not only protected her dignity, but also sparked a much-needed conversation about diversity, equity, and the challenges faced by those who break barriers. Maya's presence on that flight and her refusal to be silenced was a powerful reminder that progress often comes from moments of discomfort and confrontation. The public response to her story was overwhelming. Messages of support poured in, with many expressing admiration for her courage. Others shared their own experiences with bias, drawing strength from Maya's ability to remain poised and assertive in the face of discrimination. Maya, however, viewed the incident as part of a larger narrative. It wasn't just about her. It was about the countless individuals who face similar challenges daily, often without the means or platform to push back. Her story became a beacon of hope, encouraging others to confront prejudice, whether in their personal lives or professional spaces. As she reflected on the incident, Maya was reminded of the core principle that had guided her career. Diversity isn't just about representation, it's about dismantling systems that perpetuate inequity. Change, she knew, was slow and often painful, but every act of courage brought the world closer to a more just and inclusive future. For every Captain Andrews, Maya said in a later interview, there are countless individuals ready to challenge injustice, to stand firm and inspire others to do the same. Change is possible, but it takes all of us. This story isn't just about a flight or a single individual. It's about the fight for accountability, equity, and respect. Let it remind us all that even small actions can have a big impact. Have you ever faced or witnessed prejudice? What did you learn from it? Share your story in the comments below. We want to hear your voice. If this story inspired you, please like the video, share it with someone who might need it, and subscribe to our channel for more tales of resilience and justice. Together, we can build a future where dignity and equality are universal.